All right, well, I think we're going to get started now. So as I said, I'm Emily. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. We are going to be recording this webinar, so if you aren't able to stay for the whole thing, or you join late, or you want to share it with someone else, it will be posted to our website in the next couple days, and we'll follow up via email with that link. I also want to mention that all participants on the webinar are going to be muted for the entirety of the webinar. That's just to help lower background noise and things of that nature. But we do want to encourage you to ask questions throughout. So there is an icon at the bottom of your screen, of your Zoom window. It says Q&A, so feel free to type in questions whenever you'd like there, and we will have time at the end to go through those questions. I also want to give a shout out to the James Irvine Foundation. They are supporting this project. It is part of their Better Careers initiative, which is a 7-year initiative. I think we're just at the beginning of year 2 now, so we're really in the early stages of the overall initiative. But the aim of that is to move workers who are in low-wage jobs to more middle-wage, middle-skilled jobs. And I'll introduce your presenters, the third sector team now. So I'm Emily. I'm also going to be joined by my colleagues Sheba and Drew, who will be speaking today as well. We have another team member, Dynasty. She's not going to be talking to you all today. She's playing a bit more of a smaller supporting role, but she is on the line today. Dynasty comes to third sector from Education Superhighway, which is a nonprofit that connects American public school classrooms to high-speed internet. But we're very excited to have her on the third sector team now. I am a director with the organization. I've been with third sector for a little over 5 years. Previous to that, I was in financial consulting for the private sector. And, you know, my work at third sector has really focused on working with our government clients to improve participant outcomes. Particularly, I've worked in the arenas of early childhood, so expanding access to home visiting or pre-K and/or improving the quality of those programs, as well as workforce development programs, both WIOA-funded and TANF-funded programs. I do this work because I think that public programs can really change people's lives. My own family started when my parents were 19. They had my sister, and they accessed food stamps, and that really helped them on a trajectory. They also got a ton of help from our extended family, free childcare and things like that, so that my dad could go to college and my mom could eventually leave a minimum wage job. But I truly believe in the power of these services, and I think particularly for families that don't have a well-resourced extended family like I did, they're very important programs to have in place. And next is my colleague Drew Souders. So Drew is very passionate about design thinking. He first learned this as a tool to help him build a sustainable honey startup after college, so you can ask Drew about that. He developed practical applications in his work as an international humanitarian consultant working in Saudi Arabia and in the Caribbean in response to Hurricane Irma. And at third sector, Drew also supports our work with Washington State's Department of Children, Youth, and Families as they think about redesigning their entire contracting system to focus on client outcomes. And last, but certainly not least, is my colleague Sheba Rivera, and Sheba is actually in Boston today, but also in sort of a nondescript conference room with a blank wall. But Sheba has managed user research or stakeholder engagement in lots of different projects, both at third sector and previously, and has trained others in how to gather and analyze information to improve outcomes. And she recently completed a project in Santa Cruz County with myself and Ben Bunyi, who's also on the line from Santa Cruz, around improving the relationships between the county and their subsidized employment providers and creating new contracts that gave those providers new flexibility. And so today we really just have 3 main topics to cover. The first question Sheba will tackle, which is, what is this Better Careers Design Group and how will it be a catalyst for improvement in the workforce development system? I'll be talking through what is third sector's approach, and finally, Drew will help you think about whether the design group or the learning community option might be right for you. And as I said, we'll end with Q&A, so if you've just joined, please feel free to write questions in that Q&A icon down at the bottom of your screen. We'll be spending the last portion of the webinar going through those questions, and you all will be on mute for the entirety of what we're recording today. And with that, I will hand it over to Sheba to get us started.
Great, thank you, Emily. Okay, like Emily said, I'm going to talk about the genesis of this idea, the problem that it solves, and how it's going to work. The idea for the Better Careers Design Group came out of conversations that we had with nonprofits and local government agencies, like all of you on the phone, who were excited about implementing changes that transform relationships between one government agency and 1 to 2 community-based organizations or service providers, but at the same time recognize that to truly improve the equity of economic outcomes, we need to solve challenges that span the entire local workforce system. So some of those challenges that people face are, how do we make sure people have warm handoffs when they're referred from one organization to another, or how do you track outcomes across multiple touch points or engage employers in an entire area in a way that's not duplicative. So for that, organizations, agencies need the forums, they need tools, they need time to put into working together to diagnose and solve problems alongside other partners. So the objective of this group is really to work at that local level, tackling problems where dollars and policy are meeting the people, while also connecting state-level guidance, like that from CDSS, and complementing some statewide initiatives that are encouraging more coordination among local agencies like CalOR, CalWorks 2.0, and the Future of Work Commission. So we understand that you're all working within this very ambiguous and volatile system, and it makes trying to solve systems level problems very tricky. So this opportunity is about teaching you some approaches that work within systems like that, like human-centered design and outcomes orientation, and that helps you uncover challenges and pivot more quickly to address them. If you haven't heard of outcomes orientation before, it basically means aligning your agreements or relationships with others to focus on outcomes or long-term goals and results for the people that you serve. So what we're going to be doing in the Better Career Design Group is investigating issues that span sectors, that span multiple levels, from the client level to the organization level to system level, and learning about what pain points residents or employers or community organizations are facing, and then also discuss how to layer in an equity lens to improve the dynamics between your organization and those you serve. And you don't need to come to this group knowing exactly what program you want to solve. It's good to have some ideas of pain points, but the point of this group is to work together and dig deep into the root causes of problems and why they persist, and then collaborate with people that are both inside and outside of the group to identify some common challenges and then develop a shared vision and roadmap for the future. So what is the design group going to be made of? I'm going to talk a little bit about the composition here. It's going to consist of 15 organizations, local government agencies, up to 10 of them will be local government agencies, and up to 6 being community-based organizations in the Better Careers Initiative. And for government agencies who don't know who's involved in that group, those are organizations like the Center for Employment Opportunities and Year Up. And these groups are going to you're all going to go through an 18-month-long curriculum to learn and apply human-centered design, outcomes orientation, over 6 interactive workshops that will happen quarterly. These will be full-day workshops, and they will be dynamic, and we're going to go over what the themes of those will be, but they'll also change a bit to fit the certain opportunity areas that are coming up for you. In between workshops, you'll have technical assistance sessions from third sector that helps you to move forward, to diagnose issues and come up with solutions. And And there'll also be a learning community, which is going to be virtual and include resources and webinars that dive even a little bit deeper into some of the lessons that you're learning. So in a few minutes, I'm going to talk more about those workshops and about what we're calling applied activities here. And Drew is going to talk about the learning community more towards the end of this webinar. But before I go into that, I want to talk about what we mean when we say a local team. So these teams should all be groups that are in the same county or workforce development area. And they can be made up of any government or quasi-governmental agency that focuses on workforce outcomes. So that could be the county social service department, the workforce development board. It could even be another agency, like a justice agency, that has a retraining program, a reentry program that focuses on job training. It could also include community colleges in the area and one or more of the nonprofits or service providers that are in the Irvine Foundation Better Careers Initiative. So this group is going to be able to help you to work in tandem on some common challenges, and the composition of your exact local team, we won't know until we see everyone who applies and until you reach out to other people in your team and see who's excited to be part of this project with you. The goal here is to create a solution plan in each member's locality. This is a feasible plan to implement an innovation that incorporates diverse input and focuses on improved client outcomes. So let's talk about why this is so valuable for you. A solutions plan is going to look different for every person because you need to first decide what is the common challenge that we're going to work on. But I will give you an example of what it could look like. If you decide that the common problem that you want to address is coordinating a referral process between multiple agencies, then the first step of that is going to be deciding how is this going to be done, and what are some of the deeper problems that make it difficult to actually refer clients among different organizations. And then also talking about what is the stakeholder engagement that you went through, or what we sometimes call user research, to understand that from the standpoint, from the perspective of users, from the people who are actually going through the system and the people who are leading people through the system. Also, what sort of stakeholder engagement can you keep up sustainably in order to make sure in this volatile system we talked about, you are actually responding to the challenges that you found and challenges that are cropping up. And you also will need collectively to develop some hypothesis around the resources that you need to implement this idea. So this could mean a lot of different things for you. It could mean time, could mean staff, could mean policy shifts, it could mean new relationships. But we want you to be able to decide what you need to be able to turn this vision into a reality. It will help you do that because the solutions plan is a tool that you can use to appeal to multiple stakeholder groups. And you can present to funders, to other stakeholders that would be interested in helping you to make this a reality. So this solutions plan is really a roadmap to systems change, and that can help you to get other people on board. So along the way, we're going to have 6 different in-person touch points for these workshops. And because the main point here is to create a solutions plan, each of these workshops is going to help you to develop and to iterate on that solution. The themes, the linear process here is set, but the title of each of these workshops and the content is going to be adjusted based on the needs of your group. Just to give you an example, if through this process you decide that you need to prototype a service, there's a different set of tools that you would need to learn in order to prototype a service. On the other hand, if you decide it's also useful to develop products or a technology platform, we'll integrate a prototyping workshop that helps you think about exactly how to prototype a product. So that's some of the shifts that we'll make in response to what it is that's coming up, what it is that's emerging from research with users. So building up skills, like I talked about in human-centered design and outcomes orientation, let's talk about what that looks like and what sort of workshops you'd be attending. These workshops are going to be highly interactive. You'll be learning about how other people think about problems. You'll be developing a culture of failing fast, being nimble, pivoting around different issues. So picture here large sheets of paper, Post-its that you're moving around to uncover some of the hidden mechanisms in your system, some of the hidden behaviors of different users in your system, growing a new muscle and a new way to think about collaboration and program improvement. So we'll be using learning techniques that really help people who are in your shoes learn how to grow that muscle. There'll also be learning communities that help you to, as I said, dig a little deeper and to also interact with other organizations that are outside of the design group. Now we've talked about a lot of activities that you're going to be doing, and I want to help draw a picture of what that means for the people who are getting involved. If you think about how much time that you have in your day to understand and solve systems level problems, you probably spend a great deal of time in some way thinking about the issues or looking at data, interacting with other people in your team to plan potential improvements, but maybe not as much time as you would like. So this project is ultimately designed to increase your capacity to be able to do those very things that you do now. One of our partners recently was asked about what this time commitment for a project means, and it was a mostly similar project that they were working on. And they said that although staff time was needed to complete the project, they were doing the work anyway, and they were able to do the work better together and increase their capacity in a way that they couldn't do alone. And so that is basically what we're looking to do in the Better Career Design Group for those that are involved. We want to help you to learn some new approaches to work that you're already doing. And because these are new approaches, it's possible that this will increase some of the time that you spend working on existing duties that you have, and over time, growing the ability to do that so it supports your overall work. And depending on how your organization is structured, the two people that spend the most time on these activities could look different. For instance, the person who's attending the workshops could actually be the same person who goes and analyzes data at the organization, or they might actually manage a team that does that work. So it could be that the same staff member that's attending the workshops is spending a great deal of time on activities in between workshops to develop the solutions plan, and it could be that some of that time is actually distributed across the organization in a different way. You'll also notice that some quarters will be busier than others. My hypothesis is that the second quarter will be a busier quarter than most because you will be talking to people in your system, talking to people at your organization to really understand some of the barriers that they face. And that's probably going to take more time than a few other quarters, depending on how much of that work you already do. So it's important for organizational staff to be informed of what this project is all about and to make sure that you can advocate for increased time where necessary to be able to apply some of these new approaches that you're using. And that will ultimately help to improve the efficiency of your organization in the long run. So I'm going to hand it off now to Emily to talk more about third sector's approach.
Thank you, Sheba. And just another shout out on that slide to the Irvine Foundation. So there are grants available for each of the organizations that become a design group member. So that's a $25,000 grant to participate in this design group. And again, that's supported by the Irvine Foundation. So we'll dive now into third sector's approach. I know some folks on the call are familiar with our work, others might not be, but our theory of change is really designed to approach system-wide issues and to really center the outcomes of people accessing services. So our main clients are government agencies or departments, usually county level or state level, once in a while a federal project, but mostly sort of at that level where money is going out the door into contracts and into services. And so we really try to bring together organizations across sectors, so both kind of the CBOs who are delivering services as well as that government agency. Or in some cases, you know, the government agency themselves is delivering the services. But we really try to retool that relationship between those parties so that the main thing they're focused on is outcomes rather than what's maybe more typical is things like outputs or other compliance measures. And, you know, we think that bringing together policy, dollars, services, data, all around outcomes can really shift the way that programs operate and hopefully make real changes in people's lives that we know all of you care so much about. And so if you look to the bottom left of the screen, you know, I won't go through all of these, but just to kind of share, one of the links in this whole chain is between services and data. So this is a big piece of our work, is thinking about how sharing data, particularly back to CBOs, allows them to focus their service delivery on the needs of the people they're serving. So this can mean things like quantitative data, such as wage data from EDD. It can mean qualitative data, talking to people about their experience. But we think for the most part, it's been tricky to make sure that you're marrying both those pieces, the qualitative and quantitative, and giving it back to your providers if you're a government agency, and talking with them about what they can do with that data. Another thing, you know, we try to really focus on, and you may see in this slide, is the idea that the work is never really over. So those arrows just kind of keep going, and that is intentional because we think things can continuously be improving. Our sort of focus is on positively disrupting the status quo. We know we all have a bias to the status quo. It's what's comfortable, it's what's always been done. But we find, you know, when we work with different government agencies and CBOs, there are so many people who are excited to positively disrupt the status quo. And so at the end of a project, we often will, you know, have changed that relationship between a government agency and its providers. Maybe there's a new contract in place that really puts outcomes front and center. Maybe there's money, bonus payments that goes towards those outcomes. But we really think about that as just the first step. And once third sector leaves, that sort of continuous improvement cycle of looking at data and hopefully affecting policy and changing the way funding flows can continue far beyond when people have been working with third sector. So we hope those sort of processes get embedded. And the idea for this particular design group sort of came out of conversations both with government partners, but also with CBOs who are part of the Better Careers initiative at Irvine, around just how challenging systems level work is. And while it's great to change the relationship between one government agency and one or two providers, that doesn't really get at some of the system-wide issues that may be challenges between agencies or departments or between sectors. And I was actually at an Irvine convening of Better Careers grantees last week, and there was a lot of talk about some of these systems level issues around benefits cliffs, around referrals, around coordinated employer engagement. And we had a 2-day convening. It just sort of scratched the surface. It was exciting to hear how many ideas people had. But as I talked to more people, you know, they want kind of more time and more space to do this work. And that's where the idea of the design group came from. And Irvine in particular is very focused on making sure they fund projects that really support what their grantees are asking for. And so, you know, right now, if you think about someone moving through the workforce development system, it might be a mom who gets into a TANF-funded subsidized employment program who hasn't had a job in a while. And that program kind of gets them their first job in a while, gets them some skills and a resume, but maybe a year from then, that mom wants to move on to something else. and there might be an apprenticeship program at the community college that would be a perfect fit for her, but she no longer has her TANF case manager who's sort of giving her that idea. No one is kind of helping her to choose which program might be right for her. No one's counseling her on what might happen with the child care she's still able to access or the food stamps. So that's just one example, right, of these systems level issues that we see and that we think, you know, a group of really innovative folks at government agencies and at CBOs could come up with some really great solutions around. And, you know, we at Third Sector are just going to be here to sort of walk you through a process. So we're not going to tell you what the problems are in your community or what the solutions might be. We hope that by, you know, facilitating this 18-month curriculum, teaching you about outcomes orientation, teaching you about human-centered design, it helps you through this process to get to a solutions plan, and one that can actually be funded and implemented. So we are sort of going to be agnostic in terms of telling you what the problem is and what the solution is, but we hope, you know, some of our past projects and past experience will also be helpful to you just as ideas. And so that's what this next very busy slide is about, is some of that past work. So most of this slide is really specific to California projects, but Third Sector does work nationally. There's a bit about some of our national higher ed projects on here. The left-hand side is really a map around places where we've launched these outcomes contracts, really memorializing that change between the government and the service provider, to give the service provider more flexibility to really deliver services in exactly the way that's needed for participants. The right side of the slide is some other projects as well. Not all of these resulted in an outcomes contract. There are different ways that you can apply an outcomes orientation. It doesn't always have to be a contract, and certainly as we think about the design group, we think there will be folks, you know, who a contractual relationship doesn't actually make sense, but perhaps a new referral mechanism between two parties makes sense, and there'll be different ways that you could try to memorialize that in your solutions plan. So I won't go through all of these projects now, but we do have Ben Bunyi on the line from Santa Cruz Human Services Department, and we actually just completed a project with them a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to give a couple of high-level items about that project, and then I'll let Ben share a couple reflections. So our project in Santa Cruz was focused on subsidized employment program, which is a TANF-funded program, and we were really working hand in hand with both the County Human Services Department and their two subsidized employment providers, Goodwill and the Community Action Board, to change their relationship. And what this looked like was monthly meetings where we really tried to dive into what does success look like for this program. And we ended up honing in on 3 outcomes that we thought were most important, and those were also informed by people who had gone through the program. So that was really the user research piece, was a lot of focus groups, a lot of one-on-one interviews with folks to hear what they liked about the program, what they considered success coming out of the program. And so through all of that, we were able to hone in on a few outcomes, and then we were able to actually change the contract between the county and those providers. And finally, we were able to notice that there was funding that was going unspent in this program. And so that funding that had been previously unspent is now going to be sort of bonus payments to the provider when they reach certain outcome targets. And the providers got to prototype ideas for how they would spend that money to improve their program. And those prototypes were then informed by feedback, again, from the participants who are a part of the program. So we were really able to sort of utilize both that outcomes orientation framework and the human-centered design tools to come up with really a new way of delivering this program in Santa Cruz County. But with that, I will pause and turn it over to Ben if you have any reflections you want to share about that process.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is Ben Booney from Santa Cruz Human Services Department. And really, Emily covered many of the things that were important for us, but I just kind of want to reframe some of those, where one of the benefits really was a common language for human services and our contractors to discuss, develop, and assess quality improvement. I think there is a common understanding as to what quality improvement is, but really focusing all those activities around the idea that we have common goals and objectives and outcomes, and then having human-centered design as a means of talking about prototyping and or as an underpinning to how we prototype and design quality improvement projects together was extremely helpful. And the second benefit that I really wanted to point out is an increase in the positive perception of collaboration amongst the parties. Our relationship from human services perspective with our contractors have always been positive, but of course, imagine the idea that like, oh wait, we're, as contractors, we're now being given the opportunity to have bonuses for the unspent money that, in essence, would have sort of gone back into the funds anyway. Was definitely an increase in the positive perception, but more so, there was an increase in the positive perception amongst the two contractors. Because they either felt they worked in silos or they worked competitively with each other, but then having this common set of outcomes and a framework to talk about it really sort of synced up their ideas and allowed them to view each other as collaborators. So those were the two main insights.
Thank you for sharing those, Ben. And I think, again, the design group might look a little different. There might not be outcomes contracts at the end of it, but we do hope that, by keeping outcomes at the center, by using human-centered design to diagnose a problem and then prototype solutions to it, it really will result into more collaboration and cooperation between the different parties that might be a part of the group. So as Shiva talked about, there will be government agencies applying to be part of the design group. There will also be CBOs who are part of Irvine's Better Careers portfolio. So we do hope that, one of the results is not just that each individual organization understands outcomes orientation and human-centered design a bit better, but also that they're really collaborating and working together in new ways, and all of that is kind of baked into the solutions plan, which is sort of a concrete thing to look at, but it really just changes sort of day-to-day interactions and conversations as well. So with that, I think I will turn it over to my colleague Drew to talk a bit about how you can apply to join the design group, or if that's not the right option for you, think about the learning community. And because of our camera situation, we're going to do an awkward little shuffle here. So just a moment for Drew.
Yeah, so I did see one question come in. We're reserving most questions for the end, but this one directly relates to my content, so I'm allowed to speak to it. So as we discussed before, the groups that are going to be eligible to apply for the Better Careers Design Group are Irvine Better Careers Initiatives grantees, county social services agencies, other local government agencies that are working with significant workforce development programming, and then some quasi-governmental organizations like workforce development boards and community colleges with significant workforce programming. So if you're not one of those groups, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in 2 slides, you will be eligible to join the learning community, but you can also set up some time with us to discuss whether your group will be eligible or not. You can reach out to me directly, and my information will be a few slides from now. So when we're thinking about organizations that apply and who's going to be part of the design group, we have 4 main evaluation criteria. So the first is capacity for participation. Basically, is your organization willing to dedicate resources in terms of staff time and leadership support for the design group initiative? Secondly, does your organization have a demonstrated commitment to innovation and innovating to improve programming for the people that you serve. And is that innovation supported by your leadership as well? Third, does your organization have stated equity goals and a plan for how to achieve them? And then fourth, ability to deliver on the 4 Irvine Better Careers Initiative goals. These are all spelled out in great detail in the application, so I'm kind of running through them now. But if you haven't seen the application, it's been live for a few weeks on our website already, and the form to fill out the application just became live this morning as well. So when we're selecting design group participants, we want to make sure that the group is as diverse as possible in terms of different California geographies. Shiva, if you could reverse the slide, thank you. In terms of different California geographies, different client barriers that are being addressed, different career pathways, and then also just different organizational experience with human-centered design and an outcomes orientation. We really want to learn from you in terms of the experiences that you already have with human-centered design and outcomes, and we'll build that into the fabric of the content that we're delivering during the workshop. Also wanted to note that we will be giving preference to organizations that apply as a team. Each organization should submit their own application to become part of the design group, but if you could note which organizations you've already had discussions with and would like to partner with, we will be giving extra points to those that can prove partnership and coordination as a solid foundation to collaborate as part of the design group. After this webinar, we'll be emailing out everyone a link to the webinar recording as well as a copy of the application. So please feel free to forward that on to your networks or potential partner agencies within your locality so that you can start to form your teams for the design group. Lastly, we designed the application to be really simple. It's 5 questions, 200 to 250 word limits. As a nonprofit, we've been subject to some of those longer applications that really require a grant writer, and we want to be fair and wait a little bit more on the interviews and some of the conversations that we'll have with you as well. So if we can move on to the next slide, I'll talk about the actual details of the application period. So as I mentioned, the application went live today, and we plan to close it on October 18th. It's been posted for about 2 weeks now, so hopefully some people have gotten a chance to peruse it and started to plan. Wanted to note that while the application is short, we know that teaming can take a while, so we have the potential to extend the deadline. Please feel free to reach out to me, and we can have a conversation about that. So as soon as you submit an application, we will be scheduling interviews on a rolling basis. Interviews will be held between November 12th and 25th, but we may, after reviewing the application, have the chance to cancel that interview if you don't meet the criteria that we're looking for. With all of that, we plan to announce the design group participants by December 13th once we have that group selected, to kick off with a webinar in January 2020, and then have our first workshop in February. So pretty quick turnaround for the start of the project. From there, we plan to have a in-person workshop quarterly through June of 2021 for a total of 6 workshops. And as we mentioned before, the final product from attending all these workshops will be the outcomes-driven solutions plan, or solutions plan, which you can have and will plan to, by the end of the process, have shared with other stakeholders, including funders like Irvine, for potential implementation support. So the last piece of content that we wanted to walk you through is the learning community. So if your organization determines that you don't fit the criteria that we're looking for, so for example, if you are a CBO that's not part of the Better Careers Initiative, or if you are an agency that's working in workforce development but not in California, you will have the option to join the learning community. Some of the key things coming out of the learning community, it's going to be an awesome opportunity to hear about the report outs from the participants in the design group. You'll learn a lot of tools and resources from an outcomes orientation and human-centered design approach that you can apply to your work. And then kind of be the first to hear about how some of the state level work like CalWORKS 2.0, CalOR, and the Future of Work Commission is applying some of these things that we're talking about. So outcomes orientation, human-centered design, seeing how state level initiatives are informing and leading those practices. And you can sign up to be part of the learning community. There's an application on the website separate from the main application. We would ask that you fill it out, please, to be part of the learning community. It's one question, and we're just trying to get an idea of your organization's priorities and why you're interested, so that we can better tailor some of the content in the future. So with that, that's the majority of the content that we wanted to walk through with you today. I understand that we have a few questions that came in over the course of the webinar, so I'll turn it over to Emily to facilitate that conversation.
Yes, thank you all for making it through the 45 minutes or so of slides. The first two questions are specific to the design group, which is first, where will the workshops be held? And so I'll turn that over to you, Shiva, to talk about.
Yes, great. So we would like this to, we don't have specific areas right now, if that's your question. And we will make sure that they're are held in places that make sense for the people who are involved and who are part of the design group. Since there will be organizations across California that are involved, that means that the workshops will be in different areas over the 18 months, most likely. So you can imagine one might be in Southern California, and the next one might be in Central California. However, all of the travel and lodging expenses that you would occur will be reimbursed as well. So in addition to the $25,000 grants, you would also be reimbursed for any travel and lodging expenses for the workshops. And since this is very similar, I'll also address the question about the $25,000 grant. Thank you, Julia, for bringing that question up, because some government agencies may also have that question. Government agencies are also eligible for that funding, and the funding will flow from Irvine Foundation to third sector and from third sector to the agencies. We will work out the exact mechanisms with each of the agencies that are invited in, and that mechanism would probably be indicated in the memorandum of understanding that's signed. We have seen this work in the past. We understand that it's complicated, but there have been times before where Irvine doesn't fund the government agency directly, but rather the funding flows through a nonprofit first, and so we can be the intermediary in that case. Is there anything that you wanted to add there, Emily?
No, that's great. I think Drew also answered the other question around if someone wants to determine whether or not they're eligible to apply. Definitely take down Drew's email address, shoot him an email, and we can set up a call. Any other questions? Feel free to type those into the Q&A box. I realized there was one piece around other stakeholders that I didn't speak about, so I'll just chime in now about that. We are hoping to have a lot of participation from state level agencies. So, you know, we talked about that money and dollars kind of meet the people at the county level in California, but we also recognize that the state is a really important partner And so we know that the California Department of Social Services will be a part of this project. We've also spoken to folks in the California Labor Agency, members of the Future of Work Commission, folks in the Governor's Office on Business and Economic Development about this project. And we're still trying to figure out the exact role for each of those parties, but we're hoping at the very least they'll be a part of the learning community, possibly presenting on some of the learning community webinars, and also possibly coming to some of the in-person design group workshops. We've talked to CDSS, the Department of Social Services, about that specifically. We've also reached out to the Community College Chancellor's Office and the California Workforce Development Board about being part of the project in some way. So, you know, we're really excited about the movement we've seen at the state level around trying to coordinate amongst agencies and departments, trying to create a state-level logic model around that. We're also excited about the work towards outcomes orientation. You know, CDSS has recently finished their work group, but is now starting to implement CalOR, the CalWorks Outcomes and Accountability Review, that centers outcomes for an entire social services department, which we were able to really link with the specific program of subsidized employment on that project in Santa Cruz. So we're really excited to kind of have this design group as we're prototyping ideas, get feedback from the state on those, and hopefully vice versa, as the state is trying to think more about coordination and outcomes. Hopefully they'll be positively influenced by what's coming out of this design group. I also wanted to give a shout out to some of the other grantees in the Better Careers Initiative who are not direct service providers, but who play really important parts in the field. So there's National Skills Coalition and EDGE Coalition are part of that Irvine initiative, and they'll be working on policy plays. And so we've already talked to them about possibly being part of the learning community. Our hypothesis is that your solutions plans are not necessarily going to hinge on policy plays, because we know those take a lot of time and involve a lot of external forces. But again, we hope that the solutions you come up with can maybe influence some policies in the future, and there can be that sort of back and forth dialogue. And then finally, I think the other group that we haven't spoken about is we recognize that there are a lot of experts in this type of situation of moving from low-wage work to middle-wage work. So we are carving out part of the budget to hopefully pay for a panel of experts with that lived experience who we can have come to the workshops and provide you guys some critical feedback around as you're diagnosing a problem or coming up with solutions. Again, the exact structure of that sort of expert panel hasn't been worked out yet, but we're hoping to really be able to compensate that panel well and coach them in kind of what the design group has been working on to date, and really just have different touch points for the design group to get feedback on both their diagnosis of the problem and also the solutions they're starting to come up with. Any other questions? I guess last couple minutes to type in a question, either to do with the design group itself, the folks that'll be going through this sort of intensive 18-month curriculum, or being part of the learning community, where you'll get access to more newsletters and webinars and things of that nature to keep you up to date. All right, well, in the case of no more questions, we'll wish you all a great afternoon. Thank you for joining. As I said again, the webinar will be recorded and posted to our website shortly. The application for both the design group and the learning community are currently on our website. Please feel free to share those with partners that you think might be a good fit for either of those, particularly if you want to team up with other organizations in your county or local workforce area. And again, we have tried to make the applications incredibly simple. We really hope it doesn't take you more than an hour to fill out maximum. And if you have any further questions, feel free to email us. We can also set up a one-on-one chat. But we look forward to hopefully hearing from many of you, and thank you.